I am thrilled to welcome you all to the Rector's Forum. This is the next to the last Rector's Forum we have as long as for my rectorate. And if you would like to know in future days, the email blasts will not stop. They will continue to come every Thursday telling people what's going to be here in the Rector's Forum. The Rector's Forum lineup is thrilling beyond next Sunday. It was, just a second, let me get my spectacles on. Here we go. It was on Monday, the year of our Lord, February 8th, the year of our Lord, 2010, when I met Kim Rosen. I was then working for Oprah Winfrey on the Super Soul Sunday radio show, and I would preach on Sunday morning and then get into sedan and go to the American Airlines terminal and fly to Chicago and read books authored by the people I was going to interview the next day and make interview notes, then go to the hotel, read some more, get room service, get up at 4 the next morning, finish reading, making some more interview notes, sending them to my executive producer, and then get in a car and go to the studio, get makeup, and interview people on the radio. And on February 8th, one of my guests was our guest today, Kim Rosen. Now, I had already had this amazing book, Saved by a Poem, and had been reading it and had asked my executive producer if they could arrange for me to interview Kim Rosen. Now, here is the wonderful story. So Oprah Winfrey said, you can't talk to people before the show, save it for the air. But Kim Rosen was so persistent. She and I snuck in a lunch prior to my interviewing her in the afternoon. Now, she presented to me a poem deck, and she'll tell you more about what that is in a minute. And she said the idea is you go through this poem deck and you pull out the poem, let it present it to you that you need for today. I pulled out the poem deck. She's going to tell you, I pulled out the poem. She's going to tell you what it was. Doggone if it was not the same poem I had preached the day before from the pulpit here at All Saints Church. Well, I've always known that Kim Rosen and I are supposed to be together. We are tethered at the soul. I'm so thrilled that she's here. You don't need to know all of her background, all that kind of stuff, because what you need is the experience. But I do want you to buy a copy of this book, which can change your life, called Saved by a Poem. My copy had an actual CD in it, and you played it, and it was the first time I ever heard a poem by John O'Donohue read by somebody else. Do you see how the web works? Now, in the back of the book, you can download that CD instead of having the CD in your room. So, that's enough. I can't tell you how thrilled I am to have my very, 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 very great friend to come on the next to the last Rector's Forum to talk about the importance, the life-giving power of poetry. Would you please warmly welcome my friend Kim Rosen?
What an honor. What an honor to be tethered by the soul, at the soul, to Ed Bacon. I think many of us are here. And what an honor to be with you. This was the poem he picked. When death comes, like the hungry bear in autumn, when death comes and takes all the bright coins out of his purse to buy me, and snaps the purse shut. When death comes like the measles pox, when death comes like an iceberg between the shoulder blades, I want to step through that door full of curiosity, wondering, what is it going to be like? That cottage of darkness. And so I look upon everything as a brotherhood and a sisterhood. And I think of time as no more than an idea. And I think of eternity as another possibility. And I think of each life like a flower, as common as a field daisy, and as singular, and each name a comfortable music on the tongue, ending as all music does towards silence. When it's over, I want to say, all my life I was a bride, married to amazement. I was the bridegroom taking the world into my arms. When it's over, I don't want to wonder if I have made of my life something particular and real. I don't want to find myself sighing or fearful or full of argument. I don't want to simply end up having visited this world. When it's over, I want to say, all my life, I was a bride, married to amazement. I was the bridegroom, taking the world into my arms. When death comes, like the hungry bear in autumn, when death comes, like an iceberg between the shoulder blades, I want to step through that door full of curiosity, wondering, what is it going to be like? When it's over, I want to say, all my life I was a bride, married to amazement. I was the bridegroom, taking the world into my arms. It's a poem by Mary Oliver, and the music is by Gary Malkin from a beautiful CD called Graceful Passages. I was present on Monday for the last breath of one of my very closest friends. And maybe I agree with Ed's North Star Thomas Merton, maybe I don't, that there are no words that can convey that. Do you know? But here's what poetry can do. Here's what Mary Oliver just did for me, even though I've said that poem maybe thousands of times. She just did it for me just now. Here's what words can convey, if I may beg to differ with your North Star. What they do, I believe, is they build the arches of the cathedral. They offer themselves as the embodied walls of the temple, the circle of the sanctuary, the rock of the cave, and we walk inside the poem, and we are filled with grace. So maybe it's not the words, but words as a poem can create a sacred space. Whether the poem is about rage or God or the place where there's no difference, do you know? Between those words, as between the arches of that glorious space up there, that church, when we walk into the poem, there's grace. So Ed named this talk the Sacrament of Poems, which I love. And so I did a little study on what does the word sacrament mean. And many of the dictionaries agree that sacrament is an act and words that convey grace, that convey a grace. How do you know when you've had a grace bestowed upon you? How do you know? You don't know because someone says, I just bestowed upon you a grace, right? How do you know? Maybe it's like what Emily Dickinson says, where she says, if I feel my body is so cold, no fire could ever warm me, or I feel as if the top of my head were taken off, you know a grace because of this holographic experience that arrives almost as if unbidden into the involuntary systems of our bodies over which we have no control. The skin horripilates, which means you get goose flesh. You know, the breath quickens, the tears spring out of the eyes, whether they're tears of grief or not, when you have received a grace. And the same thing happens when you've received a poem, right? When you walk inside that poem. And what's true is that that poem, when you walk inside it and you know it's your poem, Leonard Cohen said in this wonderful poem called Basket, he said, you must go from place to place finding the poems that were written for you. So what do you have when you have a poem that was written for you? And then he says, to which you can affix your signature. Now, I'm not so sure I agree with him about that, but it is, as the French philosopher Bachelard said, it is as if you had written the poem. And then he says, or should have written it, right? So here we have these poems, and you may think, oh, I don't understand poems. Well, do you understand grace? When did you last understand the Holy Eucharist with your mind? When did you last understand that? When did you last understand a beautiful piece of Bach, or a choreography by Twyla Tharp, or an abstract painting by Georgia O'Keeffe? When did you figure out what it meant? If you did, I don't believe you. Merwin, who is currently my most beloved poet, I'm a serial monogamist in this way. Merwin said in a wonderful film called Even Though the Whole World is Burning, he said, prose is about information, and we need that. But poetry arrives from the unknown, and there is always an element of the unknown in it. We go to poetry to enter the unknown. And when we enter the unknown together, my wonderful friend from England, John Hillman, said to me once, intimacy is entering the unknown together. Think about it. Think of the most intimate moment of your life. Everyone let one come up. You know, maybe it was during sex, maybe it was at the deathbed of a loved one, maybe it was at a birth, maybe it was over tea with a good friend. The most intimate moments of your life, something unknown is unfolding. You are both vulnerable and naked in the presence of each moment showing up unknown the moment before. You know, you're not following that old script. You're not being who you know yourself to be. You're discovering moment by moment, right? So John says, intimacy is entering the unknown together. And then he said, and poetry is the language of the unknown. So when I give you a poem, I am really offering a sacrament, an opportunity to, in the etiology of the word sacrament, brings together in the 12th century French. I just learned this from Wikipedia or something. In the 12th century French, it brings together the words sacred and mystery. When I offer you the sacrament of a poem, I'm inviting you to step into the unknown with me in the deepest intimacy for a moment. So here is my command to you. Go and find your poems. Write them on your bones, which is my word for memorize. Learn them by heart, or if that's not your thing, write them on little index cards. Carry those little index cards in your wallet until they become ratty. And you can be in the line at the supermarket and pull out that ragged little index card and read it to the cashier when you know she needs it. Really. When you walk around with the poems written on your bones or stuffed in your purse, you have a sacrament that you can offer moment by moment. And you have a temple right there on that ratty index card. You have a temple whose words build the arches of a sacred space, and you can walk into it with the guy in the elevator, or your lover, or your daughter, or your mother. Do you know? One of the things Ed and I spoke about is something that if you were here last time, I had the great good fortune to be here. I spoke about again, and now I want to, in a few minutes, I want to show you a movie about what has happened since I last spoke to you about this. Was the moment, really, I think of many, many moments, it remains one of the moments when I recognize the absolute power of a poem to it's not even melting the walls between people. You said it this morning, it's discovering that they were never there, those walls. It's discovering in the moment of that poem, oh, that separation. I thought you were Maasai and I was American. I thought you were a teenager and I'm a middle-aged lady. I thought you were black and I was white. I thought you were evangelical Christian and I was raised Jewish. Gone. These are my beloveds. They're not acting right, but that's good enough. Worked very hard to get that off the top of the screen, but now it's there. But these are the faces of some of my beloveds. When I first went to Kenya, and the movie will tell you the story of it, but I want to tell you a few details that are not in the movie. When I first went to Kenya, I went in part because, I'll say first, I went primarily because my dear friend and inspiration, Eve Ensler, who started V-Day and 1 Billion Rising, and I know this church has been active in 1 Billion Rising, and I love that. I'm rising with you. Started with a Maasai woman named Agnes Pryor, started a safe house for girls who had to run away from FGM. And when I got to the safe house, I'd never been to Kenya, I went on a personal level because I have had a history of being painfully shy. And I also had a rough teenagehood. So I was painfully shy with everyone when I wasn't in a formal situation like this, but particularly with teenagers. And I figured if I went to Kenya to this safe house with a bunch of teenagers, this would cure me of my shyness, my fear. I got to the safe house, and I was truly paralyzed with fear when I got there. And I was given the names of about 50 beautiful young women, teenage girls who were living there. And later, one young woman came to me and said, "Do you remember my name?" You know, there's like maybe 30 girls listening to see if I did. And I could only remember one name. So I said the name, praying it was the right one, and I said, "Salula?" And everyone burst into laughter, pointed at the youngest girl, said, "That is Salula." Salula had just been rescued at the age of 8 from a forced marriage to a 42-year-old man. This is actually Salula here, a few years later. She said, "I am Jacinta." She said, "Do you know any songs?" I felt like I was being given an opportunity to redeem myself, right? So I said, "Well, what I really love is poetry." A moment of panic. What could I say that these girls would relate to? I know many poems by heart, but what could I say? I blew it on the time. I think. Am I done at 11 or at 10:45? Okay, great. What could I say? And then pouring out of me came, "One day, you finally knew what you had to do." These are girls who had to run away at the age of 8, at the age of 12, at the age of 14. They had to leave their parents, their homes, their tribes, their villages. They had to go, many of them alone, through the bush, braving wild animals to get to the safe house. One day you finally knew what you had to do and began. Though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice, though the whole house began to tremble, and you felt the old tug at your ankles, "Mend my life," each voice cried. But you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do. Though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations, and though their melancholy was terrible. It was already late and a wild night, and the road was full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice, which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save. We were all in tears at the end of that, and I'll let the movie tell you the rest of the story. But a year or so later, I got an email from Jacinta saying, I don't know what to do. I've graduated high school. The law no longer allows me to stay at the safe house. I have nowhere to go but back to my village unless I can find funding for college. And if I go back to my village, I face the same, not exactly the same, because now she's grown up and has more education than anyone in her village, even with a high school education. No one, male or female, has been that educated. But she goes back to the same kind of life she fled originally. Can you please help me find funding for college? I had never, ever raised funds for anything, but I asked my friends, and the movie will tell you the rest. So let me just close with a poem, and thank you all for sharing in this communion, which is really what it is for me, this communion of poems. This poem is the poem I couldn't stop hearing this morning during your sermon. Not Christian, not Muslim, not Jew, not Hindu, Buddhist, Sufi, or Zen, not any religion or cultural system. I am not from the East or the West, not out of the ocean or up from the ground, not natural or ethereal, not composed of elements at all. I did not descend from Adam and Eve or any origin story. My place is the placeless, a trace of the traceless, neither body or soul. I belong to the beloved, have seen the two worlds as one, and that one called to and know. First, last, outer, inner, only that breath, breathing, human being. It's by Rumi. Thank you all so much.